If you didn't already know it, we're constantly under different forms of mind control. I'm going to discuss some of these techniques, and I'm also going to get into some specific programming that can greatly affect you. And I don't mean in a great way, I mean it can greatly affect you in a very bad way. Just a few years ago, there were researchers from Osaka University in Japan who studied 86,000 people over 18 years. And in that study, they found that sitting in front of the TV for an average of 5 or more hours a day leads to twice the risk of fatal pulmonary embolism. And those are blood clots to your lungs. And that's just one example of how truly dangerous and deadly television can be for all of us. But there are other forms of mind control that we're under constantly, and most of us don't even recognize it. For instance, you may remember in the movie The Matrix where Neo got to choose between the red pill and the blue pill. The blue pill was meant to put him back to sleep, where the red pill would wake him up. Most of us that saw that scene probably didn't see anything deeper than just that. We wrote it off as another case of Hollywood turning a complicated situation into some kind of a metaphor. But what you probably didn't realize is that you're living out your own little Matrix scene every time you go to the pharmacy. So keeping in mind that the red pill would let Neo wake up to the real world, but the blue pill would let him stay asleep in the dream world, next time you go to your pharmacy, take notice of what color all the sleeping pills are. You guessed it, the sleeping pills are blue pills. And that's certainly not a coincidence. Researchers have found that the color of a pill actually makes a difference in how it works. In one study, every patient was given the exact same sedative, but some patients received it in a blue pill and others in an orange pill. The blue pill takers reported falling asleep 30 minutes faster and sleeping 30 minutes longer than the orange pill takers. So in a different experiment, subjects were told that they were going to get a sedative or a stimulant, when in fact they were getting neither. All of the pills were placebos. Yet 66% of the subjects who took blue pills reported feeling less alert, compared to only 26% of those who took pink pills. And that's because we've been trained to think that blue equals sleep. And here's another example. Is it just me, or have you guys noticed that every time you walk into a grocery store, what's the first thing you usually see? Flowers, right? Pretty much every grocery store out there, when you first walk in the doors, they're going to have a bunch of flowers set up there for you. And did you ever question why? Is there a reason behind this? You bet there is. Even though the mass majority of us never buy flowers at a grocery store, there's still a reason for this. It has to do with the subtle science of mind control known as priming. The idea behind having the flowers in these grocery stores is to hit you with a product that is highly perishable yet fresh, and that will prime you into thinking of freshness, and that you will carry that freshness mindset with you all the way back to the discount meat case. I know it sounds insane, but humans don't connect completely unrelated ideas like that, right? Yet it's confirmed pretty much every time they test it. Another example of priming is as simple as finding that people will oftentimes keep a room cleaner if it smells like disinfectant. And oftentimes people think a room is cleaner just because it smells like disinfectant. But that subtle reminder is enough to make people think, this is a clean room, I should keep it clean. Again, I know this sounds insane, but all of this stuff has been tested and proven. In one study, scientists instructed volunteers to form sentences using words associated with older people, or the elderly, under the guise that it was a language proficiency test. The scientists found that as the students left the study, they actually walked slower than the students who were given neutral words earlier. These students were primed to think of elderly stereotypes, and they actually took on those characteristics they associated with the elderly. Another example of this is a term called pareidolia, and it's how the human mind can create human faces out of practically everything. Researchers at the University of Vienna a few years back found that we subconsciously tack on emotions to these faces, no matter what it is, no matter what kind of an object it is. No matter where we see the face, we'll tack on emotions to this. The study also concluded that many car manufacturers fully understand pareidolia. The researchers actually concluded that lower, wider cars with a wide air intake and angled or slit-like headlights give a picture of power. And that's what many drivers are looking for when they're looking for their sports cars. Another great example of this is the Bugatti. This car is called a Bugatti. And check out that face. Now compare that with the more mom-friendly or family-friendly or soccer mom type car, the basic Honda sedan, and take a look at this face. It's a little friendlier, right? It's all part of the science. So I wanted to give you a few examples before I kind of got into the actual channel that I'm discussing here, and that channel is called Investigation Discovery. I've always been a researcher. I've always had that kind of a mind. I love puzzles, I love games, I like trying to figure out mysteries. Twice in my life I had a license to be a private detective, and I was also a medic for the military for 4 years, where I worked in a clinic. And that job was being an investigator. And now here I am on YouTube. So of course I'm drawn to Investigation Discovery because it's basically true crime 24/7. And I went through a patch not long ago where I was watching a lot of these shows, back to back. But I started feeling it have an effect on me. I started feeling a bit of an oppression about myself. And I knew exactly where it was coming from. I was seriously watching too much Investigation Discovery. Not Investigation Discovery for you. Again, it's filled with all different kinds of shows. All of them are true crime, and they get pretty grisly. There's some pretty freaky stuff on Investigation Discovery. But there's tons of other shows out there like CSI, Law & Order, The Closer. There's tons of other shows, Cold Case. So you may be really into watching some of those shows as well. And this is a warning. It's a warning to all of you, and it's something I had to figure out the hard way myself. But it turns out there was a study just a few years ago from Purdue University that suggests that the more we feed this craving for crime drama, the more distorted our views of the criminal justice system become, crime rates overall become distorted in our minds, and we actually become much more fearful of the outside world. Before I continue, I'll point out some of the obvious symbolism here. Is something else I've noticed when you look at a lot of the titles for these shows. There's almost always some form of Illuminati symbolism, usually in the form of the all-seeing eye. And of course, those of us that look into these kinds of things understand that that is not a coincidence either. Glenn Sparks was a professor of communications who studies mass media effects, and Susan Sarapin was a doctoral student in communication. They conducted 103 surveys with jury-eligible adults about their crime television show viewing and their perceptions of crime in the judicial system. Their research was presented at the International Crime, Media, and Popular Culture Studies Conference in Indiana State University. Sarapin says, many people die as a result of being murdered in these types of shows, and we found that heavy TV crime viewers estimated 2.5 times more real-world deaths due to murder than non-viewers. People's perceptions also were distorted in regards to a number of other serious crimes. Heavy TV crime viewers consistently overestimated the frequency of crime in the real world. These viewers of crime shows also misjudged the number of police officers and attorneys in the total workforce. Lawyers and police officers each make up less than 1% of the workforce, but those surveyed estimated it more than 16% or even 18% respectively. So this study also linked heavy viewership of these shows with, quote, mean world syndrome, the belief that the world is more dangerous than it actually is. They continue on saying, our studies have shown that growing up from infancy with this unprecedented diet of TV violence has 3 consequences, which in combination is called mean world syndrome. What this means is that if you are growing up in a home where there is more than, say, 3 hours of television per day, for all practical purposes you live in a meaner world, and you will even act accordingly than your next-door neighbor who lives in the same world but watches much less, if not any, television at all. The programming reinforces the worst fears and apprehensions and paranoia of people. We have scientific proof of how this programming works on us. That's why I find the symbolism behind investigation discovery even more interesting. When you take a look, it's the id, it's your ID, it's your id, and it's trapped inside the black box. On my channel we talk a lot about the black box, and this goes back to the black cube, or the cube of Saturn, and Saturn is just another representation of Satan itself. The id is the personality component made up of unconscious psychic energy that works to satisfy basic urges, needs, and more importantly in this case, your desires. The id operates based on the pleasure principle, which demands immediate gratification of your needs. So isn't it interesting we have this network that's filled with violence and sex and basically any sin you could imagine. It's all profiled on this network. And we've seen the scientific study of what happens when we engage ourselves with this kind of stuff too often. And we take too much of this stuff inside. Saturn, Satan, feeding our id through this programming. So I'll leave you with that. I think it's very interesting. It's definitely a warning, not just for you, but for myself. Keep all this in mind. Probably best just to turn our TVs off altogether anyway. But thanks for checking out the video, guys. You take care out there, alright? And I'll talk to you real soon.